I love Pokemon. Not only the games, but, well, everything around it. You cannot really tell from the graphics and, well, the emptiness of the last few games. Although I do have good hopes that Winter Waves might fix all of this, but there's just so much care in every little detail. From the lore, to the designs, to the names of those critters itself. Even the name Pokemon has a surprisingly deep lore behind it. Much deeper than only Pocket Monsters suggest. And the name, surprising enough, ties into some historic Japanese linguistics. So let's talk about that today. If you're up for some language secrets behind the name Pokemon, be sure to stick around. I am Erik, and this is the story of the word Pokemon. So our story begins in the Meiji Era in Japan. Oh yes, we are going deep, very deep. But before we dive into that, let's take a look at the name Pokemon itself. Pokemon is, as you might know, short for pocket monsters. Monsters that can fit in your pocket. That might seem like a bit of a weird name, since, well, most of them don't. Except maybe Joltik. He's cool. He can fit in your pocket. He's cute. So, why the name? Why was the name chosen? Well, this might be a bit of a leftover from its previous name, Capsule Monsters. Capsule was a reference to Japanese gashapon or simply gachapon machines. These are very famous in Japan and give you a little capsule with something nice in it. These capsule toys do fit in your pocket, but Game Freak and Nintendo could not get the rights to this name, however. So it was changed to Capumon and later Pokemon. And while this name technically fits Pocket Monster, and I can see the relation, the name Pocket to this day still seems a little bit strange to me. So I have a theory. Call this a little Erik theory, based on nothing but conjecture and indirect information. But the name Pocket Monsters could also be a little nod, a little tie-in to the release of the Game Boy Pocket, which was a follow-up to the original Game Boy, which had the same name and was released only a couple months later after Pocket Monster. So this way, have your Pokemon literally in your pocket. Alright, tangent though. If we talk linguistics, Pokemon is something what you call a portmanteau. Two words combined into one, with their original definition mostly intact. Think like podcast, which is short for iPod and broadcast. But while this is true, you might see that for Pokemon at first glance, this is a bit weird, since Pokemon skips the C and also has a weird thing on the E. And here is where it gets interesting, because what the brilliant mind of Satoshi Tajiri, the inventor of Pokemon, and of this word of course did, was to take two English words, pocket and monsters, and then make them sound and look like Japanese words, Poketo Monsuta. And this is actually the word they made the portmanteau of. So while the word may sound Japanese, it's actually based on Japanese versions of English words, Pokemon. And the accent aigu or acute accent on the E was actually added so that we don't say Pokemon. Why did he do all that? Why go to so much trouble just to create a new word? And what does it have to do with the Meiji period? Is everything real? Is it just a fantasy? Is this real? Well, so what Tajiri did wasn't some weird magic or him just toying around with words. The process that he used is actually quite famous in Japan and it's called Wasai Eigo in Japanese. This is the art of creating new Japanese words based on English loanwords. This is a big thing over there and is used in marketing and all kinds of stuff. But the reason they started doing this, and this is actually quite interesting, is because the Japanese handle loanwords a bit differently. For example, my language, Dutch, is a Germanic language, which means most words have their roots in countries in the northern of Europe or around Germany. But when the Netherlands was under French rule in the 19th century, all kinds of words from that language, which has Roman or Latin origins, found their way into the Netherlands, into the Dutch language. This is why we say parapluie, for example, which means umbrella. And the thing I'm sitting next to is called a bureau in Dutch, which stands for desk. These are literally the French versions of the word and were naturally adopted by the Dutch people. The culture of Japan is a bit different, however. While the Dutch sailed the world and probably are more open to accepting foreign words as maybe their own, the Japanese were traditionally very isolationistic. This is a political philosophy that broadly means something like you don't want to be involved with other countries. And they were very, very strict about this, to the point that most people of other countries weren't even allowed in. This changed during the Meiji era. Meiji? This changed during the Meiji era, which started in 1868. This is a very interesting point in time for Japan, and I strongly advise you to look it up. Anyway, while their borders opened up, a lot of mostly English loanwords quickly found their way into the country. For the most part, they did this very intentionally, since isolationism was such a big part of Japan's identity for such a long time. If something was a loanword, they made that very clear. They even have their own writing system for it, katakana. And katakana is one of the 3 writing systems in Japan, the other 2 being kanji and hiragana. So thanks to katakana, someone from Japan recognizes immediately that something is a foreign word, something like beer or coffee, which was introduced by those world-traveling Dutchies to Japan. You're welcome. Is immediately recognized this way. Katakana is not only for loan words, however, but also for English words made Japanese. This is why Pokémon Name is also written in katakana. But because all of this happened so quickly during the Meiji era, for the most part, there wasn't a real understanding yet of the meaning for all these new words. So what happened? A lot of English words in Japanese began to differ from the original intent, their original meaning. How can this word work in Japanese? All this led to a lot of experimentation, inventing that process called Wasai Eigo. Okay, this is really cool. 2 famous examples of this are karaoke and cosplay. Both are words that originate from Japan, but are actually partly or fully based on English loanwords. Karaoke literally means empty orchestra, derived from the Japanese kara, empty, and a Japanese version of the English orchestra, okesutora. Cosplay actually stems from the words costume and play, which the Japanese made into kosupure, and when we heard the word, we translated that into cosplay. Nowadays, Wasai Eigo is such a common practice in Japan that companies use it for their marketing and to make words sound exotic or foreign. But this works both ways as well. At first Pokémon was actually going to be just named Pocket Monsters in the West, but the American Al Khan, responsible for promoting big Japanese brands in North America, found that Pocket Monsters sounded a bit too much like the other role-playing games, so he specifically asked them to make it sound more Japanese. And Wasai Eigo, and especially the concept of portmanteau, is deeply rooted into this franchise. If you want to learn more about all this, I really recommend you follow Lockstin and Noggin. He does very awesome analysis of the origins behind names and appearances of Pokemon. And if you like this kind of deep dive into the etymology and origins of video game, be sure to give a little like to this video. I and the content of future me would really appreciate it. And well, I think that was all. That was all I've got for you today. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.